just think it's a great story, and everybody's dying for a good story.
It's a movie that whole families might appreciate.
It's very, very simple and very profound.
It's about geese.
Amy Alden came halfway around the world to live on her father's farm.
Make it just like you remember it.
I don't
You don't what?
remember it. They don't really know each other because she hasn't really spent much time with him.
He was a dreamer.
He's just this guy with ideas. His mind is always going. You know, like a scattered genius.
He's an inventor. He has all these little sort of contraptions around the house. What's that?
It's a refrigerator.
But he'd forgotten what it meant to be a dad.
I'm gonna be in the shop a lot.
I'm not a baby. You don't have to hold my hand.
It seemed like nothing could ever make them a family.
Hi. You must be Amy. I heard a lot about you.
Hey, how you doing? This is Susan. She's a friend of mine.
Excuse me.
Until one day,
Hey, what do you think you're doing?
an amazing adventure was born.
Can I keep him?
Sure.
Hey guys, Mom. Hey geese. Hey, hey, hey.
Columbia Pictures presents a film by Carol Ballard, Fly Away Home, starring Jeff Daniels and Academy Award winner Anna Paquin, with Dana Delaney and Terry Kinney. Fly Away Home was inspired by the real-life experiences of Canadian artist and inventor Bill Lishman.
We've been sitting here envious of birds for millions of years, and so I'm the embodiment of that first one that got up and flew with the birds.
Lishman not only flew with them, he led the geese on a daring transnational flight. Knowing that migratory routes are a learned behavior in geese, handed down from gander to gosling, he attempted to lead his flock south.
We raised a flock of 18 geese, and we tried an experiment to fly them to Virginia, which was successful. They followed us to Virginia, and we let them go, and the following spring, they returned on their own.
I remember seeing the thing on TV of Lishman going across Lake Ontario with the geese, and you're just going, whoa!
It's something that we all dream about, and I've had dreams about that, you know, to be able to do that. We all want to be able to do that, and Bill Lishman actually does it.
The key to Lishman's success is a process called imprinting.
Hey, 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 hey. Come on, guys.
It's amazing, isn't it, how they follow her around like that?
Yeah. First living thing a goose sees when it's born, it automatically assumes it's its mother.
To expedite production, Lishman and his team began the process of imprinting before the actors even arrived on location.
They recorded my voice, and they played it to the little baby goslings. Come on, sing! Hey, 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 hey.
Everyone that dealt with the geese in the movie had to imprint themselves into the psyche of the goose.
Yeah, we had to connect. We had to bond with the geese. We went on a little weekend retreat. I think individually there was the cabin, and we each had like half a dozen geese, and we were in the room with them.
I was with only the female geese. It was sort of a feminist thing.
You have to make these sort of goose sounds at them.
Come on, geese, look.
Basically, you just get down on your hands and knees in front of the geese and make a lot of very stupid sounds. And
They love
You're
that.
really good at them.
thank you.
Sort of have to throw your dignity outside the window.
The one where I can get them is a, huh?
Because basically you have to become a goose.
Hey.
Guys. Go on, your turn. She's too proud.
And action.
I've worked with more difficult co-stars, say compared to, say, the spiders, in Arachnophobia, the geese are much better.
Mom, geese! Mom! Mom!
Where do they go? See, that's the problem. I get calls all the time.
You know, they land on people's front lawns. They're a golf course. Like, that's why we have Ordinance 9314. All domestically raised geese have to be rendered flightless.
Now what you do is you take the wing and you just shave a bit off the cuticle, right?
What the hell do you think you're doing, huh?
Geese don't like Ranger Glenn.
If your birds fly, I'm gonna have to confiscate them.
But I'm after them because it's kind of my job.
So they're flying now, are they?
What do you want?
Just came by to say hi to your father.
I told you to stay off our property. Daddy!
There are millions of small-minded, small-thinking people out there. And Thomas is one of these guys who sees a bigger picture, who sees beyond it and says, no, I'll figure out how to do it. I had this idea. About the geese. I've been watching the way they've been, following you around. And it occurred to me that they just might follow my airplane, too.
They're not gonna follow you.
No. But they might if you help me.
Guys, that was great. Throwing geese reset.
In my experience making animal movies, this was the easiest time ever. The geese were all handled by Bill Lishman and his son, Jordy, and he knows what they're thinking and what they want to do and what they don't want to do, and it's great to have somebody like that who is able to live in the world of a goose, which is another planet. And Anna, the first day she arrived in the set, there was an egg there that was hatching, and Bill put it in her hand, and a little bird hatched out in her hand, and that made an impression on her.
Hey, look up at that goose, Anna.
And Anna is simply a natural. I mean, she's really able to do it without even thinking about it. She went through an enormous change during the making of this film. I mean, she changed from being a little girl to being a little woman.
Been around a lot of flyers in my time, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I think you're a natural.
You really think so?
Some people are when it comes to flying. I think you're one of them.
It was terrific, because that's what happens in the film.
Unlike most directors, Carol Ballard often directs from behind a working camera.
I get a lot of my best ideas by shooting, because it's kind of where I come from.
Okay, let's back it up and try it one more time.
The camera for me is ultimately what's going to be up there. And by shooting some of it, whether or not the shot that I shoot is in the movie, the important thing is that I get ideas that I can't get if I'm standing off the side, observing the thing.
Filmmaking has never been about dialogue with him. It's been about images, and that's what he concentrates on. He tells his stories through imagery.
Carol Ballard chose Caleb Deschanel to capture the visuals of Fly Away Home.
I've known Caleb for a long, long time, and my first feature, The Black Stallion, he photographed.
Out of this first flying with the birds came this idea that it's possible that we could teach these birds a new migration route.
And if geese can do this, then maybe really rare birds like whooping cranes and trumpeter swans, maybe they can learn it too. We can start new flocks and give them a crack at a comeback,
Lishman and his partner Joe Duff and Dr. William Sladen have co-founded an organization called Operation Migration, dedicated to the restoration of migration routes for endangered or threatened species of birds.
We're working with sandhill cranes this year, and they're such a marvelous bird. They fly so differently than geese. Now, if we can apply this to the endangered species, and in particular the whooping crane, now that's the most endangered bird in North America. There's 140 left in the wild. So the idea is to get a secondary flock and end them up in a different location. If we can do that, if we can establish that migration route for another flock of whooping cranes, boy, that's a dream.
Yeah, we're rolling.
Lishman's one of these guys that won't take no for an answer.
He believes in the ability to dream and make a dream happen.
Pick one. Mark.
We have embellished certain areas of the story, but I think that we've stayed close to the spirit of what he tried to accomplish.
Suppose I built another aircraft and then taught Amy how to fly.
It's a great idea. You know, birds follow me, I follow you. We all go south.
Now we're gonna go hard to the right, lean into the right, just like we're flying.
The journey will take 4 days of good weather.
You got it. I'm not doing anything. It's all you, Amy.
30 nautical miles to Lake Ontario.
Smooth push out of the barn. Up we go.
20 seconds.
Mama Goose, come in. They've flown the coop.
Most of the films that I've done, the scripts have been based on some values of people and the environment and how good life can be.
Dad! Look! They're really flying with me! Woo! When Amy and her dad try and fly them south, she gets to be good friends with her father. Hello, Papa Goose! This is so cool!
We're connected, you know, to the animals, to nature, to each other, and we lose sight of that too easily.
This is a big family epic.
Oh my gosh!
It's something really original. It's just eccentric enough that it makes you feel kind of hopeful about life in general.
If you've ever had the desire to be a goose, this movie's for you.
Really how this all came about can be blamed on my mother. She was a biologist, and she instilled in me a whole reverence for nature. I'm probably not much different than most kids that see birds, and because I think since man began, we've been envious of birds, the three-dimensional freedom, the whole wonder of flight. So when hang gliding came along, of course you didn't need a license, you just had to have enough nerve to run off a hill with one of these things, and so I survived the hang gliding, and then that evolved into ultralight flying and became really one of the Canadian pioneers in ultralight aviation, you might say, but just because I had this desire to get up there and fly. But then one day in the fall, I had an amazing experience. So there was a stubble field, just black with birds, and I thought they were starlings or something like that. Throttle back. As I got down, the whole field rose up, and all of a sudden I was in this huge flock of ducks. And here I was in this stream of birds, and it was just absolutely amazing. They couldn't outclimb me, and I couldn't outclimb them. And here we were cruising across the countryside, and it was in this river of birds, and all it just took me into a new time and space. It was like I'd been there for a million years, and it was such a phenomenal experience. I had to try and repeat it because I had to try and find some way of sharing that vision with other people. So I met a guy by the name of Bill Carrick who had got birds to follow a boat. He provided me with some goslings and taught me about Konrad Lorenz, who wrote the book on how birds learn things. And from that I learned about imprinting and got those young geese to follow the aircraft, and it took me 3 years to figure out exactly how to do it, but make a long story short, in 1988 I got 12 geese that would fly with me, and it was just everything I thought it would be. And it just so happened it was the first time that you could get a little SVHS handheld video camera, and I acquired one of those, made a little documentary of it. It had the image of the birds from their point of view, and you saw those birds flying right next to you, and that caught so many people's imagination.
Well, Bill and I had been friends and acquaintances for a long time. I mean, he's an artist and I'm a photographer, and I helped him a little bit in his work. I'd photograph a few things for him. And basically, our partnership or our friendship is evolved around flying. We were both ultralight pilots and had interest in the same kind of thing. I think to some degree, Bill and I are similar. We're half scientific and we're half creative, and we're kind of torn between the middle. You know, we don't know which side of our brain is working the best, but anyway, it's a kind of a camaraderie there, and we've been friends for a long time.
Joe at that time joined up with me, and the two of us flew a flock of Canada geese to Virginia, and in the following spring they returned, much to everybody's amazement, mine included. I mean, it was absolutely phenomenal.
That really garnered the interest of the scientific community. You know, it really caught their attention, as well as the public interest.
There was a lot of interest in making a film of that whole idea. So, of course, Columbia Pictures made Fly Away Home, and it really gave a picture of, you know, it wasn't the absolute true story by any means, but there were little bits and pieces of it.
I had seen the piece on 2020, so I knew about the geese flying with the ultralights, and you know, so I knew that aspect of it. But then, you know, anytime you take anything real and you make it dramatic, you have to find a seamless way of introducing a dramatic story to something that's basically realistic.
You know, the further we went with it, the more, you know, I tried to take his real story and make the movie about that.
And the fact that we were meeting him on his farm was also a factor, because he has all these amazing sculptures he's created. He has all these airplanes and hangars, these little ultralights that all are of various designs.
He has this incredible underground house that he invented and designed and everything. It's like going to see, you know, some space guy on Mars or something. I mean, it's unbelievable what an incredible place this was. Well, so we talked, and he talked about stuff that he was interested in, what he was interested in terms of the geese and everything. He said, well, today, you know, I'm expecting the geese to come in, you know, and we're sitting there, and all of a sudden we hear this noise and look up, and there's like 25 geese are circling around, and they land right there in front of us. And those are the geese that he flew down there. I mean, hey, did he arrange that? I mean, obviously something was happening here.
Fly Away Home did two good things. It provided us with enough capital to carry on a number of studies, and the other thing it raised the awareness of people right around the world about the plight of endangered birds. And when we land, we say, did you see the film Fly Away Home? And it gives them the image to start with, and then you can elaborate on it.
In Fly Away Home, I mean, the basic reason for the geese to go south was just for that particular flock of geese, but it was to save a wetland. And this is not, Operation Migration is not about saving a wetlands. This is about saving a species, you know.
He subsequently did 5 or 6 other migrations with geese to refine the technique. And then they got into sandhill cranes, which is a cousin to the whooping crane. Very similar, but abundant. There are thousands of sandhill cranes.
They were readily available species to see if the technique would work. The goal all along has been the whooping crane. It's the icon of endangered species, if you will, in North America.
I don't know if you're aware, but the whooping crane, you know, back in the 1940s, there were only 15 birds. All the birds we have today are descendants of 15 birds.
When you realize there are only a couple of hundred of them, you suddenly start to think that, you know, it's very fragile, and where they winter along the Texas coast, a hurricane or something could wipe the whole flock out. That's why it's important to get a second migratory flock happening.
So the whooping crane recovery team, the Canada-US team, joint team that's responsible for these birds, started a non-migratory population in Florida. They raised birds in captivity, released them in Florida, and those birds were never shown a migration by parents, so they became resident, and they stay in Florida. And we want to start a third population, migratory, migrating from Wisconsin down to Florida. And once we do that, we'll have 3 discrete populations, and then the bird hopefully can be downlisted.
And cranes are quite a different species, so we had to learn a whole lot of new things to get cranes to follow us. And we did one study after another. And the other thing was that we couldn't fly with them like we could fly with geese, and not. We had to keep the cranes wild. So there was a tremendous amount of work in learning how to wear costumes and how to use the appropriate sounds, how to raise the cranes, how to fly with them differently. The whole thing was a whole new learning experience, and we had to go through the R&D, if you will, of cranes.
When they leave the nest, they pay attention to the first thing that really looks after them and nurtures them, and they imprint on that, normally their parent. So that's how the process works. We just substitute parent for pilot, and the birds imprint on us.
Ideally, if we were going to raise these birds to fly with us, we would morph into an exact replica of a bird and fly with them. That's impossible. We have to stay in human form, so we have to mask that human form. And the reason for that is when these birds get to adult age, they're quite territorial. If they become imprinted on humans, consider humans as part of their species, then that interaction between the humans and the adult birds is not a good thing.
We costume raise the crane so that they don't recognize the human form. We don't talk in front of them. We don't make wild gestures with our hands. We keep everything very low key as far as any human activity, and we stay away from them as much as possible. The only contact even the costume has is just feeding and training exercises, getting them to follow the ultralight.
We're trying to develop a technique where we can take a bird from the wild, have as little impact as possible on it, keep it as wild as possible, not introduce it to anything human, and get it south. So it's still a wild bird. It reverts to the wild, it avoids people, it is what it's supposed to be, except it has this vague memory of a migration and some indication of how to get back to where they started. That's what we're trying to do, has a little impact as possible on these birds.
Part of the spin-off of doing these migrations, part of the joy of this migration are the people you meet, because it's traveling across America on a different element entirely. You're going like the birds go, and you land in people's backyards that are removed from urban areas. So you meet a cross-section of America that no one really knows, and it's quite wonderful.
Just about every night we get invited for dinner. I mean, that's a big undertaking to take that, to entertain people all day, give them everything they need, and then invite them to dinner at the same time. It's a huge undertaking, but we have some fabulous apple pie. So it was great. The response we've had is just amazing.
The team is really an excellent team. Starting with Joe. Joe is a man who's dedicated and attention to detail, has tremendous passion for the whole thing.
On one hand, you've got Bill, who's not only dyslexic but colorblind, and sort of all over the place, not an organized moment in the man's life, but we love him dearly. And on the other hand, you've got Joe, who is super organized, very focused to details, has to have things just done a certain way. So I guess, the funny part is trying to find the medium.
Heather Ray joined us about 3 years ago and has just worked doggedly at keeping things going and looking after all of the administrative things that are just such a headache to me and Joe.
She's one of those people that spends her weekends thinking about what she can do to make it better and how we can fundraise here and how we can fix the website there. She's one of those people that's involved, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. It's in her mind, and that you can't hire. That's not an employee. That's a team member.
Okay, and Richard, it's Paula.
Yep.
Yeah, they say they're going to be at Cherry Hill at 8 o'clock, and they figure that'll be their destination.
Okay, thanks very much.
Richard Van Hoevelen, who's a multi-talented guy, has worked with me for 23 years, loves the whole thing and has a passion for it too, and can fill in anywhere, do anything from flying the aircraft to fixing a flat tire, anything.
I'm sort of more behind the scenes, making sure things get done. and let them bask in their glory, so to speak.
He sort of runs the ground crew and makes sure the pens are up, the trikes are flying fine, and you know, all of those are sort of his responsibilities.
And now with the migrations, now I've been trained how to fly the ultralights as well, so I'm also a backup pilot for all these guys.
Don and Paula are saints. They're just wonderful people.
Instead of being part of the ground crew, Don had decided really with the others it would be helpful if there was an aircraft flying above the trikes. They were having problems with communications, and as a communication relay, the airborne aircraft up higher would have much more range and be able to keep contact with the ground crews and help to keep everyone informed as to what was happening, because things didn't always go as planned.
Yeah, there has to be some sort of a lifeline. Simply because they're up there flying, you never know what's going to happen. They could go down, they could lose radio contact. So as soon as they're on the ground, I need to know.
We have charts and radios and communications abilities by being above that we can draw on help for them.
And also the fact we're in an enclosed cockpit.
Right.
We can have the maps, we can have the manuals and everything handy. In the trikes, they can't do that. They're open. If they open a map up, it's going to be gone.
It's like any safety net, you know, hopefully you never use it. It just sits there doing nothing. But there are times when they save the whole show.
Bill and Joe have a way of, you know, getting people involved in the project because it is very magical.
You stand in awe of birds no matter what, and it's wonderful to be up there with them and be able to reach out and have their wings brush your fingertips and see them. They're characters, they're individuals, they play with the aircraft when they're learning. There's so much joy out of flying with birds that it becomes very addictive.
It's quiet, and you go for a walk in the trees. You know, the trees are just 20 feet below you. That's a nice way to fly. It's spectacular. It's really, people just go nuts over it.
Waking up in the middle of the night, sort of, and driving out to their locations, and watching it all unfold, and everybody's quietly doing their jobs and setting up, and you know, it just sort of builds, and the sun starts coming up, and suddenly, you know, there's 3 trikes taking off, and then finally, you know, Joe and the birds, you know, come out of the mists of time, and you know, it's an amazing thing to see. I don't think I can express it in words.
There are so many emotions all tied up into it, and any one can come to the surface at any point, you know, while you're doing this. I mean, you know, naturally we're flying low level usually in early morning, and so there's a degree of danger in that. You know, that's to be considered anyway. You got to pay attention to what you're doing. 9 times out of 10, the birds obviously fly behind the wing, and it's a delta wing type aircraft, so the tip is aft of where you are, and so you end up with one hand on the control bar and turned around backwards in the seat, you know, looking over your shoulder at these birds. And there's a silo, there's a tree, I didn't see that one, you know. So you get that aspect of it happening, you know, because you're always looking backwards.
It's incredible. It's really an incredible feeling to fly with them. It's something you can't really describe. It's something you have to experience.
As they get used to the whole concept of migration, of going from one place to the next, there's a mental attitude that takes over the birds. You can see it, and they become dedicated, and they pay attention to the aircraft, and they lock onto it, and they get down to the business of covering ground. And we were flying over Indiana, 2,500 feet on a perfect day with a 20-mile-an-hour tailwind. So I raised the RPM of the aircraft by about maybe 50 RPM, bumped it up to around 42 miles an hour. And the birds just kind of locked in. It was their speed and their cadence, and the lead bird was that far from the wingtip, and he just locked in and opened his wings and just sat there. And the next bird fell in behind him, and we had this string of pearls off the wingtip that lasted for maybe 30 minutes. It was just an amazing thing to do, you know. And then you realize that these birds have been doing this, the same migration, the same traditional route for 9 million years.
It's about giving something back, and if they can pull this off, I mean, from something that started as sort of a flying sculpture to actually put the footing down to save an endangered species, it's quite a remarkable achievement.
You know, a lot of recovery efforts and dollars are spent on species, and it's just to catalog what's happening to them, why they're declining, or what's wrong with their habitat. There's millions of dollars spent just in that research, and this research is actually replacing the species. This is not seeing what's wrong or seeing if we can identify the problem. This is actually putting back. You know, this is one that's reached the level now where we're ready to start reintroducing the birds, and it's an important study. And if we can fund it, we can do it. We can save the species.
When it comes to the overall project, yeah, I wake up in the morning and really feel good about how things have progressed. You know, from very simple beginnings to well, this last migration was absolutely wonderful, and it was such a great success, and it took a real team effort and having everybody working together and enjoying it while they're doing it, and then seeing that the birds got there and that we're one step closer to saving the whooping crane. The whole thing is quite wonderful, and I do feel great about it, but you can't stop there.
Hi, I'm Bill Lishman. In 1988, I learned to fly with a flock of 12 Canada geese. And out of that grew an idea perhaps we could show endangered species new migration routes. It's been an amazing adventure and a learning experience for everybody. So share with me now the odyssey of the Ultra Geese.
The story of the Ultra Geese migration experiments really begins in 1990. Dr. William Sladen lives with his wife Jocelyn in this house called Clifton in Northern Virginia. And aside from being a medical doctor, he has spent his life studying birds, from penguins to trumpeter swans. It was Dr. Sladen that pointed out that large waterfowl, ducks, geese, swans, and cranes, learn the migration routes from previous generations, and if this continuum is broken for some reason, then they fail to migrate. He and the renowned Canadian naturalist William Carrick, who had coached me initially in imprinting techniques, believed that there was a chance to restore the trumpeter swan population in eastern North America if they could be shown a migration route, perhaps by ultralight aircraft. Dr. Sladen helped by providing swan eggs and encouragement. Bill Carrick hatched them in his incubator. The swans were a new experience. Once hatched, they were slow to learn compared to the geese. The trumpeter swan is the largest flying bird in the world. They have difficulty taking off from land, and they mostly fly from water. Our idea was to raise them on a pond and get them used to a mock-up aircraft similar to this aircraft that I was learning to fly from water. The first part of the plan in 1990 was to raise a small flock of swans and attempt to get them to fly with an aircraft, and perhaps lead them on some cross-country flights. The second part was to raise a flock of Canada geese, and if we could get the permits, lead them on a migration from Ontario to Dr. Sladen's in Virginia. It's really interesting to experience the difference between the two species. For while the geese are always active and eager to follow, the swans seem lazy and slow to learn. Eventually the swans are following our mock-up aircraft, and as they grow, they take on a wonderful grace and character, and we understand why they are the birds of royalty. Just as everyone is becoming attached to the swans and their individual personalities begin to appear, disaster struck. We had not taken into account that not all officials were in favor of our plans. After all, we were both outside the scientific and bureaucratic communities, and the permits did not cover the scope of the experiment. We got caught in a political and bureaucratic crossfire, and the swans became the pawns of the debate. They were confiscated. Our young swans, treated like aliens from an enemy camp, were taken to a secret facility, and an attempt was made to render them flightless. Son Aaron and I followed the officials, but all efforts to get them back were blocked. We were in a state of shock. With just the geese left, I put all my efforts into their well-being and enjoyed their world of discovery. The flock is well imprinted, and within 3 weeks I'm again sharing their three-dimensional freedom and reliving the wonders that I first experienced in 1988. I receive a terse letter from the Wildlife Bureaucratic Service claiming the permits issued to fly the geese was an error, a clerical error. Using an obscure and outdated law, they revoked my permit to keep the birds, and I am instructed to turn them over to an aviculturalist and render them flightless. The birds are grounded eventually and sent to live in Stalag Goose.
We had been thwarted by an overzealous wildlife bureaucracy, and it looked like the project was grounded for good. But we got letters of encouragement from all over, so by 1993, Dr. Sladen and I decided to try again, only it would be a simple project with a few geese led from Ontario to Virginia. Dr. Sladen called them the Ultra Geese.
Wildlife bureaucracy poised to stop the experiment at the slightest infraction. We would only have one chance, and it would have to succeed. It could not depend on one pilot, and it couldn't depend on one plane. I couldn't do it single-handedly. The project needed a second dedicated person. The best candidate was Joe Duff. He kept his aircraft at my strip, and we'd flown together numerous times during the previous decade. He's an excellent pilot and related to the birds well.
And we've also got the two places put together, your two places, my two places. So let's walk right up to her. Go give him a hand.
With permit in hand, we were soon collecting eggs. Now, while the Easy Riser had worked well in my initial experiments in '88, I believed there were more suitable craft that would lend themselves to the project. The problem was there was no production aircraft that had the right speed range nor had the endurance that we would require. We liked the idea of using a trike, a craft that had gained a lot of popularity in Europe. With the trike idea in mind, I felt we could more closely resemble a parent bird, and there would be more likelihood of success. I made a model, then I met with Gerard Thévenot, the designer of one of the best trike wings in the world. And as you can see, he wondered if there's any sanity involved in what we were doing. After some slow flight trials with the new Cosmos wing, we took the gamble, and having no other choice, we ordered 2 of them. On our return to Canada, we found a new group of flying partners beginning to experience the world. Daughter Carmen helps with the initial imprinting as soon as they've struggled out of the egg.
Come on, guys.
Watching them run, it's possible to visualize their evolution from the dinosaur 100 million years ago. Playing goose parent and spending time with them is an important part of the imprinting process. And while doing so, I work on a scale model of the goose head that I propose to add to the wing when it arrives from the Cosmos factory. By the first week of June, the wing has not arrived from France. So I create this jury-rigged contraption with the hope that it will be close enough resemblance to the real aircraft once it arrives. A number of unanswered questions nag at us, particularly safe stopover points on the way to Virginia. Joe outlines our proposed route.
We really believe it's important to follow traditional migration routes, but that means the first leg of our trip takes us right across Lake Ontario. It's about 40 miles wide at its midpoint, so we're out there for about an hour. After that, it's clear sailing through the state of New York until we hit the mountains in Pennsylvania. Once over that hump, it's a clear run down through Maryland into Virginia, and we'll eventually end up at the Airlie Center, about 50 miles outside of D.C.
With good goose habitat in mind, first we consider landing at state parks. However, to avoid another layer of bureaucracy, we opted to seek out a chain of private grass airstrips. North America is dotted with these little strips owned by unique individuals, all who share a common love for the adventure of flying or anything aviation-oriented. Traveling highways and byways over a week, we found 8 sites that were close to our proposed route. The road trip ends at Airlie, where we are welcomed by Dr. Sladen and then given a tour of the beautiful 3,000-acre facility. Once the aircraft arrives, we have to work feverishly to mate the engine to the airframe and assemble the various parts. So with time at a premium, my big idea to create a head and tail and paint the aircraft like a goose is abandoned.
So how does that get?
Our plan is to create an aircraft using a lighter, less powerful engine. It will have the proper speed, range, and endurance, and most of all, the reliability to fly to Virginia with only a few stops. First are a few taxi tests without the wing. We're dismayed to find that we'd erred in our imprinting techniques. We had mistakenly thought that bigger was better. A goose family in the wild is comprised of about 5 goslings and 2 parents. We made the mistake of putting all the goslings in one large group. The goslings, although initially imprinted on Joe and myself, became more imprinted on each other while we were away in France. They became like street kids. Trying to get them to follow was very frustrating. With the wing on, I'm ready for the first flight test. It's an untried combination, and it's always nerve-wracking. So we move to a longer airstrip where there is more margin for error. Holding my breath, I get it in the air, and I'm relieved to find it flies beautifully. Well, maybe the landing's not that great. Concerned for the birds' safety, we create a guard that will keep them clear of the propeller. One of the requirements for the experiment was to make sure that the birds are healthy. So we call on the expertise of avian vet Dr. Mike Taylor, who gives them each a checkup. Now, while my airstrip had worked well previously, it's in a valley and surrounded by trees, so trying to do the initial flights with the geese in an aircraft that only has a few hours on it didn't seem prudent. In the interest of higher safety factor, we moved most of the birds to Willie Castile's 3,000-foot airstrip a few miles to the north. The birds didn't like the move, nor did some of the locals, for the initial flock is released from the pen in the middle of the night, and it's only with the help of the community that we're able to retrieve most of them. Joe and Aaron run their legs off, trying to instill the basic idea in the birds, which are just over 10 weeks of age. But they really don't want to fly with us. For 2 solid weeks, we work at it. The delay in introducing them to the sights and sound of the real aircraft and keeping the birds together in too large a flock, then moving them to the new location, have compounded our imprinting problems. They are confused birds. And it seems they have little inclination to follow the aircraft. They have a mind of their own, and instead of staying with the airplane or returning to base, they fly where they wish and they land where they want to. They're in farm ponds, at cottages, on Lake Skugog. We are constantly having to round them up and bring them back. It's frustrating dawn to dusk work. Every day we're on the verge of giving up. It's part of the adventure we could have done without. At this point, Dr. Sladen arrives from Virginia and fits the birds with the government leg bands. We all agree we'll give the project a week. If the birds don't fly, we'll cancel it. But then one bird starts to fly with the plane. We keep one flock at the home airstrip at Purple Hill, but they too prove difficult. While they'll take off, they quickly circle back and land on their own. Frustrated, and not to be outdone by the wayward geese, I demonstrate that I can land as short as they do. Only I need a little shrubbery to help me stop the rollout. Many days we have to sit and wait for the wind to drop. Taking the lead from one goose that follows the plane, a number of the birds eventually get the idea and they begin to fly with us. Morning and evening, whenever the weather allows, we fly, flight after flight with them. Of the 36 birds that we started with, we eventually just get 18 birds that will fly with us consistently, and we gradually increase our flight times. By mid-September, they are up to flying well over an hour, and it's time to try our first cross-country flight. We have never before attempted a landing with them at any place other than their home base. Our first cross-country flight is 30 miles to the north, and the date happens to coincide with the first day of goose hunting season. When we arrive at our destination, the geese show little inclination to land. They even attempt to head home. I get on the ground and I call them till I'm hoarse. Joe stays in the air and keeps rounding them up and bringing them back. The winds pick up and he has a constant struggle to maintain control of the craft. Finally, after numerous low passes, the birds touch down. We count them. There's an extra bird. A wild one has joined the flock. And then on our return flight 2 days later, he drops out. On windy days, I write a detailed plan to prepare for the lake crossing and the southerly migration. Joe and I reenact a scene from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Not quite. But we do test our insulating floater suits. There are hundreds of what-ifs. October 10th is our planned date of departure. On the 9th, the ground crew departs to set up base camp at Frenchy Downey's airfield on the south side of Lake Ontario. The next morning, after a sleepless night of anticipation, we're ready. We're full of nervous anticipation. The aircraft are warm in that cold gray dawn. It appears that everything is going to plan. A few miles away, Clark Muirhead takes off in his amphib to play guardian angel over us and keep a watch as we cross over the big lake. The cloud bank over the lake looks ominous. Clark, out in front in the amphib, contacts us and assures us the weather ahead is fine. Our concerns all summer have been about the effects of this huge body of water on the geese. Will they tire halfway over and land on the lake? In many ways, this is our hour of truth. Jim Bishop in the safety boat is able to stay beneath us the whole route across. With a slight tailwind, our ground speed has picked up to 35 miles an hour. Our fears of crossing the lake diminish in unison with the miles covered. Our actual lake crossing takes only an hour and goes without a hitch. The geese stick to us like glue, and our lake crossing fears vanish like a wisp of smoke. It is certainly more comfortable once we're across the coastline and are again over land. Meanwhile, the Downies and their neighbors have turned out about 100 strong to welcome this rather strange airborne Canadian invasion. I land first, and Joe keeps up with the birds, who show their usual caution at landing in strange spots.
They're headed north again. Maybe we better go around them up.
The geese and Joe disappear over the horizon, and for a moment we hear gunshots. What a relief when they appear again.
Oh, I'm starting to work.
To my surprise, they come in for a landing, passing right over me and landing center stage, right in front of the crowd. We have pre-arranged for immigration and customs clearance, and Carla Hengiger from the U.S. Immigration welcomes us officially to the U.S. soil. Next morning, we consider taking off, but the fog at our next destination keeps us on the ground. The winds pick up, and we wait for 3 days, while 40-mile-an-hour winds gradually subside. Then on Saturday morning, the geese once again form up with us, and we take a southeasterly heading across New York State toward Pennsylvania. We settle down to revel in the beauty of it all as we progress across the rolling hills and mature farm communities of New York. The winds are favorable and it's easy flying. The mountains of Pennsylvania lie ahead. At a safe altitude over the Appalachians, the Apollo satellite navigation units keep us on track. We make several stops. One here is unscheduled. Meanwhile, Dr. Sladen awaits us in Virginia. A high-pressure system keeps flying conditions near perfect as we pass from Pennsylvania through a bit of Maryland and then into Virginia, in just 4 stops and in as many days. October 23rd, we're right overhead early. Dr. Sladen and a film crew awaits us. The afternoon light is perfect. The air is absolutely still, and the whole scene is surreal. It's a magical, crystal clear evening. The tired and thirsty geese land without hesitation. We are greeted by Dr. Sladen and we strip off our outer flight gear. There's a large welcoming committee. All 18 birds have made it. The flight has been a wonder to us all. We have flown south with the birds and the dream has been realized. Friends and strangers alike congratulate the team, and we recount the details of the flight many times. The geese are given a fine home at Airlie, and because it's goose hunting season, they are kept penned. Eventually, when the hunting season closes, they are released to be free birds. On several occasions, either Joe and I return to Virginia and fly with them. It is an extremely cold winter, and unfortunately 2 birds do not survive. The big question was, could they, after being shown the way once, find their way back to Purple Hill? In April, we traveled by road back to Airlie, only to find that our 16 birds have departed, but we don't know where. We search for them on the route back. Then halfway through New York State, we get a call. They are back home in Purple Hill. Needless to say, we're elated and we rush home to greet them. Our whole community is caught up with the success of it all, and Joe and I are given a hero's welcome. The project had been a success, and we received accolades from around the world.
but many were still not sure that what we had learned would apply to the endangered species. We needed to try the experiment again with twice as many birds and take them twice as far. This time, acquiring permits is a little easier, so Joe and son Geordie set out on a quest for eggs. That's Geordie in the lead, looking like a coureur de bois. This year, Joe and I stepped back from the initial imprinting, and Geordie plays the role of parent goose. Soon he'll be joined by biology student Kirk Goolsby from Dr. Sladen's camp. The two will work as a team to raise the birds.
The route we selected last year worked really well, so we're going to repeat most of that down to Virginia. Lake Ontario is still there, and so are the mountains in Pennsylvania, but once we reach Virginia, we'll lay over for a few days. Then we're going to head south again, down through North Carolina. We have to cross the Great PD Swamp, which is a real problem, down into South Carolina, and eventually end up at the Tommyaki Center on Cat Island, just south of Georgetown.
We also changed our base of operations to a sod farm a few miles from Purple Hill. With its wide expanse of turf, it affords far greater safety. We have learned from our mistakes of '93. This year, everything works well, and by mid-July, 36 birds are on the wing with us. Daily practice sessions give us a chance to once again study the flight characteristics of the birds. This bird, flying just above the wing, is able to take advantage of the pressure wave over the leading edge and can almost glide with no effort. When it loses the position and drops down into normal air, it has to speed up its wing beat considerably in order to keep up with the aircraft. Some shots here are slowed down electronically to allow us to observe more clearly the poetry of the total bird. It's always amazing to me how steady the head stays while all else is in fluid motion. Here it is again at normal speed. The shot again slowed a little gives us an insight on how the long primary feathers separate and twist, imparting a propulsive thrust on both up and down strokes. The sod farm location has worked well. There are no losses, just one mishap. A gosling is run over in the early taxiing practice. There is no major injury to the goose, just a temporary limp, which prompted Kirk to name him Igor. Later, Igor becomes a favorite and assumes a leadership role in the flock. October soon arrives and we are southward bound across the lake again, repeating the scenario of the previous year, only with double the entourage of geese. Also doubled are the number of people awaiting for us at Frenchy Downey's. We really have a warm feeling landing here again, to such a welcoming committee of friendly people. And this year, the geese do not hesitate and land perfectly to the joy of the crowd.
Across the shore, the south shore of the lake at about 30 feet.
No, beautiful.
just down the treetops.
Yeah, You were following them, or they were
following us. The problem is a couple of birds that don't like the wing. So when they're leaving, they're down like this. And then, of course, you go down and they go down.
Yeah.
So I try to do this. That screws them all up.
For the past 40 years, Frenchie Downey has been building a home-built aircraft called a Pete and Pole Air Camper.
We'll be able to do this.
It's powered by a 1929 Model A Ford engine. Over the years, Frenchie has suffered a great deal of derision from his friends as to the possibility of this thing ever getting off the ground. Then in August of 1994, half a century after he bought the plans, he got it airborne. At daybreak, after a fine northern New York potluck dinner thrown for us by the Gaines Valley Flying Club, we wheeled the aircraft out. And once again, we were winging south with our 36 charges, Igor flying right close to the cockpit. These birds fly quite differently than last year's birds. While they follow well, trying to get them to altitude is a constant struggle, and most of our flight is at very low altitude. We crossed New York's answer to the Grand Canyon, stopping by the airstrip of Carl Perry south of Mount Morris. Then an overnight at the Townsend family at Jolantra Field near Bath. It is at Bath we meet Marilyn Abbey, a teacher, and her husband from the village of Addison, New York. They persuade us to veer a couple miles off course and lead the flock over their school. It lies in this mist-shrouded valley ahead, and as we pass above, 800 young students are waving at us. Crossing into Pennsylvania, we land at the beautiful airstrip of Roy and Betty Hughes.
So you try to come through here each year?
At every stop, biology student Kirk Goolsby keeps track of the details. Onward over the Appalachians, we skim along a scant few hundred feet above the ridges of some of the most mountainous region of our trip. It gives me a great thrill, a sense of connection with history that reaches back 250 million years. These are the oldest mountains in North America, stretching from Georgia in the south and Newfoundland in the north. Their mellow forms, shaped by the sandpaper of time, have the feel of well-worn wood. I can't help but think how in our two frail aircraft we are the first humans to share this marvelous flight, a tradition that has endured season after season since long before man ever existed. At each stop, a count is taken. The birds are fed and watered. Then, a shocking surprise. We've lost Igor. With a weather system approaching, it's pointless to backtrack and search for him. Sadly, we must press on. The ridges get lower and lower, and after a stop at the airstrip of John and Liz Brown, we find ourselves cruising over the rolling farmland near Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where little over a century ago the major battles of the American Civil War were played out. I think about my great-grandfather, Captain Bobby Darden of the Virginia Artillery, who somewhere down there long ago took a mini ball in his forearm in one of those horrific battles. Riding the lift created by a slight wind over the easterly ridge of the Appalachians, we pass over a corner of Maryland to the east of Camp David. And then at Point of Rocks, where the Potomac River parts the ridge, we swing west into Virginia and start our final stretch for Airlie. The birds, tired now after their long flight, keep slipping down to fly at treetop level. It's not the safest for us, but it does afford us a magnificent view of Virginia's wealth of beautiful homes. crossing Route 66 just north of Airlie, were hit by severe turbulence. It's a strange anomaly in the weather pattern. But the air smooths out again by the time we're over Airlie Centre with its manicured landscape. Flying a circuit, we pass over International House and set up for a touchdown at the specially prepared strip at Ravens Hollow. Geordie and Kirk, who have arrived ahead of us, call the birds in for a perfect landing. The geese are shepherded into a specially prepared pen, and in the days to follow, they're sexed, weighed, and fitted with identifying neck bands. A week later, good news, Igor is located in Lock Haven, Pennsylvania by Gail and Bill Hunter, and they generously truck him 200 miles to Airlie, where he is returned to the flock. But a strange thing happens. The once proud leader of the flock is now goose non grata, and he's shunned by his siblings. He takes to the water to consider his position. While Gavin Shire, Airlie's lead biologist, observes his relationship to the swans. Joe and I spend a week planning our next 400-mile leg to the Tom Yawkey Wildlife Center in South Carolina. By late November, we leave Airlie and set course for the Carolinas. Again, the birds will not climb. At one point, they follow a flight of wild geese in for an unscheduled landing at the horse farm owned by Miss Peggy Augustus, and it takes a little explaining to her on our part. There's another stop at the Lotus Shrine of Swami Satchidananda on the James River. We land on the date of the Swami's 80th birthday. The geese are quite curious about the shrine and spend the day exploring. Just as he was landing here, Joe's engine had quit, so he unloads his motorcycle and heads out in search of new spark plugs. The next morning, we jump-start it, and after removing a thin layer of frost from the wings, we were headed south again. Virginia is a big state when you have a constant headwind. Our ground speed is seldom more than 20 miles an hour. Sometimes we feel we could have walked the route faster. At this stop at the village of Clover, Geordie and Kirk spend the day relating to the birds.
Turn it in.
With bad weather forecast for the next day, toward evening we fly another 10 miles to land at Big River, where Jim and Sandy Compton put us up in relative luxury. Even a hangar for the aircraft. Jim is a retired crop dusting pilot and regales us with many an aviation tale. He tells us a pilot's worst two enemies are ground fog and dirty fuel. 3 days later, at a stop in North Carolina, Kirk and Geordie set up the pens while David Woodhouse, the most experienced ultralight flyer of the crew, puts his expertise to use and helps Joe sort out a persistent imbalance with his wing. Before the sun has risen the next day, we hustle to get airborne. There are patches of ground fog, and we think of Jim Compton's warning. But it still looks thin enough to proceed. The fog thickens so much that for a time we lose sight of the ground. Even the video camera quits working. It's a frightening time. Our guardian angels are with us, and the only clear patch for miles reveals a brand new airstrip, a gift that we take advantage of. Later in the day, we're able to proceed, stopping overnight at the home of the Wallaces near Aberdeen, North Carolina, where they treat us to a feast of barbecued oysters. Two more stops and a long, drizzly run over the great PD swamp finally brings us to the Tom Yawkey Center a full 10 days after we've left Airlie. Dr. Sladen has driven the route and is there to welcome us.
The dominant bird, and the first one that fell out of migration from Ontario. And yeah, in fact, it's about time they lost some weight.
Yeah, we can actually stop the horn right now. No, we should.
Very important to have a little beguiling.
Generosity, dedication, wildlife conservation.
Bob Joyner, the resident biologist at the Tom Yawkey Center, fills us in on the history and conducts us on a tour of the 20,000-acre preserve. It's fascinating to us Canadians, more used to northern landscapes. The geese are penned in an area appropriately called Goose Pasture. 3 days later, leaving Kirk in charge, the geese are released to explore on their own, while we all head back to Canada for the Christmas season. A week later, the geese disappear completely from the Yawkey Center, and despite a concerted effort in the Carolina, there's not a feather of evidence of their existence, except for one goose found near Myrtle Beach on New Year's Day. The next spring, we return to pick up our aircraft, and without geese, we sadly return home, contemplating their demise the whole way. We arrive back in Ontario in early April, and the birds are forgotten. Then, April 19th, big surprise. 5 months after we left them in South Carolina, we get a call from a wildlife officer in Niagara Falls. Igor has been sighted in a park. And before the elation has a moment to subside, we get a call from the sod farm. 28 of our geese, with some wild ones, have returned. And the next day, Igor arrives too, with 3 wild females. He just stopped by the falls on his way home. We're totally elated. Twice now, the aircraft-led migration has worked. In the spring of '95, a total of 33 geese of the 36 that flew south had returned. We contemplate our next project.
Well, as most people know, Canada geese aren't threatened or endangered, but we had learned a lot from them. We felt now we were much closer to trying this experiment with the bird most in need, the whooping crane. So in 1995, as an interim experiment, we raised a flock of sandhill cranes. Again, not an endangered bird, but a close cousin to the hooper.
In '95, while most of our time was taken up with helping Columbia Pictures and Carol Ballard produce Fly Away Home, we raised a small group of sandhill cranes in an attempt to have them follow the aircraft like the geese. Our experiment is successful, and although the cranes are more difficult to raise, they soon become expert at flying with the ultralight. But it is this bird, the whooping crane, that we wish to help. It once inhabited most of North America, but now there are only a few left. Joe explains what we hope to do.
There's only one wild migratory flock of whooping cranes left. They nest at Wood Buffalo National Park in the Northwest Territories of Canada, and they travel 2,500 miles to the Gulf Coast of Texas. What we would like to do is work with the whooping crane recovery team to establish a second flock. We'd introduce them in Prairie, Canada, and hopefully lead them with ultralight airplanes all the way to the southeastern United States.
Yes, the new dream is to help establish this second flock of migratory hoopers. It will hopefully ensure their survival forever, and we also wish to pass on what we have learned to others around the world who are working to save endangered migratory birds. As a footnote, by November of 1996, 2 of the ultra geese that had come back to Ontario were observed again back in the Carolinas, having flown south on their second season. We believe the rest are also returning south, but with no effective way of tracking them, we have to rely on public information as to their whereabouts. To that end, as you've seen in this documentary, all of the ultra geese wear this yellow striped gray neckbands, starting with the letter K. There is also an 800 number at the end of this program. We would greatly appreciate any reports of sightings of the ultra geese.